Something just shifted inside the Department of Justice, and it could directly impact both Donald Trump and James Comey at the same time. Because behind the scenes, federal prosecutors are quietly revisiting decisions, evidence, and actions that date back years. Actions that until recently were treated as political history, not active legal risk. But now, that line is starting to blur. In just the last 24 to 48 hours, there have been subtle but meaningful developments, legal reviews accelerating, internal disagreements surfacing, and pressure building from multiple directions inside Washington. And all of it points to one uncomfortable reality. This situation is no longer just about Trump or Comey. It's about whether the system itself can handle politically charged investigations without damaging its own credibility. Here's the past coverage isn't fully explaining. Accountability and institutional trust at the highest levels of government. And once you see the full picture, the implications become much bigger than the headlines. So let's break it down step by step. Right now, officials inside the DOJ are reviewing key materials tied to Trump-era investigations. At the same time, questions are resurfacing about how Comey handled sensitive memos documenting his interactions with Trump. Those memos, once seen as part of a political controversy, are now being looked at through a legal lens again. Meanwhile, Trump allies are pushing for accountability, arguing that past investigations may have crossed legal lines. On the other side, legal experts warn that reopening these questions now could be seen as political retaliation rather than neutral enforcement of the law. And that tension between accountability and perception is where things start to become unstable. Because internally it is not completely unified on how to proceed. Some officials believe that if legal standards apply, they must apply regardless of political consequences. Others are concerned that moving forward aggressively could create a cycle where every administration investigates the last. Before we go further, keep this in mind. Internal divisions at this level rarely become visible unless the stakes are extremely high. That alone tells you how serious this situation already is. To understand why this moment matters, you have to go back to the timeline. In 2017, Trump fires Comey as FBI director. At the time, it was framed as a political decision, but it quickly became something more, a legal and ethical debate that dominated headlines. Comey, after being fired, documents his interactions with Trump in detailed memos. Some of those details eventually become public. That leads to investigations, congressional scrutiny, and years of political division. For a long time, that's where the story stayed, inside politics. But now, years later, those same events are being revisited under a different lens. Not just as political controversy, but as potential legal exposure. And that shift changes everything, because it raises a fundamental question. Can actions taken during a presidency be revisited later as criminal behavior? Or does that create a system where every transfer of power leads to legal retaliation? And that question doesn't just affect Trump or Comey. It affects multiple groups across the system. First, political leaders. Current and future presidents, cabinet members, senior officials. These individuals now face a new reality. Decisions that were once considered political may later be treated as legal risks. That means every conversation, every directive, every internal discussion could potentially become evidence. And that changes how leadership operates. Second, federal investigators. FBI agents, DOJ prosecutors. They now operate under increased scrutiny, not just in the moment, but years later. That creates hesitation, risk aversion, second guessing, and in high stakes cases, hesitation can weaken enforcement. Third, the public and the legal system, because trust is the foundation of any justice system. When high-profile cases are questioned, that doubt spreads. It affects how juries think, how attorneys argue, how citizens view federal authority. And that's where this becomes bigger than politics, because the system itself starts to shift. We're already seeing 3 major changes take shape. Change 1, investigation credibility. Before, federal investigations were largely assumed to be independent. Now, every move is viewed through a political lens. Change 2, presidential power boundaries. Actions like firing officials were once clearly political. Now they may carry legal consequences years later. Change 3, the DOJ independence debate. The question now is simple but critical. Is the system acting independently or politically? And right now there's no clear answer. Uncertainty, but here's what most people aren't focusing on. Timing. Legal pressure builds quietly, and then suddenly it surfaces. That's exactly what's happening here. Another overlooked factor, both sides have leverage. Trump allies push for accountability. Comey's defenders warn about dangerous precedent. This isn't one-sided, it's a power struggle. And the real risk isn't just whether charges are filed. Twist, it's what happens after, because even without charges, trust can drop. Narratives can spread, institutions can weaken, and if charges are filed, everything escalates immediately. Urgent, so where does this go next? There are 3 realistic scenarios. Structure. Scenario 1, charges move forward. This leads to a major legal battle, intense media coverage, and political fallout. Impact. Scenario 2, no charges. The DOJ reviews everything but declines prosecution. The story fades, but questions remain. Scenario 3, political escalation. Investigations expand, rhetoric intensifies, and the issue becomes long-term conflict. Right now, Scenario 2 appears most likely, but that can change quickly. So here's what you should watch. Structure. Official DOJ statements, movement in federal courts, reactions from Congress. These signals will reveal the direction of this story. And before we close, remember this. This isn't just about Trump or Comey. It's about how power, law, and accountability interact under pressure. Because once a precedent is set, it doesn't stay isolated. It becomes part of the playbook, shaping future decisions, influencing behavior, redefining accountability. So even if this doesn't end in dramatic courtroom battles, the effects are already unfolding. Quietly, steadily, and the deeper you look, the clearer it becomes. This isn't just a moment, it's a signal of how future conflicts between politics and law enforcement may unfold. So the real question isn't whether this matters. It's how far those effects will reach, how deeply they will reshape the system, and how long they will last.